How do we find peace when there is no justice? How do we carry on when we are carrying a pain that has no closure, no righting of wrongs, no restitution? It's a specific pain we feel when we've been hurt by a person or a system that will never apologize. When we know we can't call police, can't file a lawsuit, can't demand accountability, when there's nothing else we can do but move on, that injustice inflicts yet another wound. It's a wound that can be even harder to heal. In the TV series The Boys, superheroes run the world, and superheroing has become big business. They control politicians and police, so if a superhero in their swashbuckling knocks down buildings, tosses over cars, and stomps on bystanders, there's no repercussion. So if you lose your home or an innocent loved one is hit by the shrapnel, there's nothing you can do. The opening episode of The Boys, it starts off with an accidental murder of a man's girlfriend by one of those superheroes. The boyfriend realizing that there will be no court case, no legal restitutions, and nothing he can do about it. In his novel, Dream of Ding Village, writer Yang Liangke writes about a tainted blood scandal in China. Rural villages were encouraged by the government to sell their blood, and corrupt blood sellers would bleed those villages dry, using unscrupulous methods and reusing needles. When HIV/AIDS broke out, entire villages contracted the virus and died. In the novel, Ding Village can do nothing to demand justice. They are simply too sick to stand up against a system that exploited them. The heartbreak of Bambi is not just that his mother dies, spoiler alert, but that she is killed by man, a relentless creature they cannot stop, who threatens the whole forest with violence. Even the great prince can do nothing in the face of man except to run away. There are many stories about this type of pain. It's a pain of craving justice in a world where justice cannot be found. When we can't appeal our case, when there's not something we can take to police, when the world itself seems to conspire to keep us silent, that pain can stab deeper than the original knife that cut us. It lingers and infects. You'll know this pain if you've ever been criticized online and then had the accuser block you before you could respond. If you've been fired from a job for reasons that weren't your fault. If you've ever heard a racist or homophobic slur slung at you from a moving car. If a lover cut off contact before you could get in the final word. You want to respond, you want to do something, you want to clear your name or find your justice, but you can't. Or more seriously, you know this pain if you've been assaulted and no one would believe you. Or if you experience racial discrimination and everyone waves it off, saying that sort of thing doesn't happen in Canada. Or the ones who hurt you were the ones who were supposed to protect you, and there is nowhere else to turn. Here we have a pain of the injury itself, doubled with the pain of injustice. There's nothing else we can do except write stories about it. Stories where fictional characters get the revenge or justice that we can never get for ourselves. The Bible has a story like this too. You could say that the entire story of the Israelite people is this type of pain, but I want to focus on one story in particular, Hagar. Last week, we heard the story of Sarah and Abraham about how they struggled to have a child, and yet in their old age were promised that they would give birth to the boy Isaac. In their struggle to conceive, they tried to take matters into their own hands, and Sarah forced her slave girl Hagar to be with Abraham. Hagar became pregnant with Abraham's child Ishmael. Because this story is found in the Bible, because it happened so long ago, we tend to sanitize it and gloss over the violence that happened. A slave is trafficked, used for reproduction like she was livestock, forced to have a child that she couldn't claim as her own. This has been the story of enslaved women right up until modern times. Theologian M. Sean Copeland outlines how Black women's bodies became objects of reproduction in North America. Not people, objects. She writes, Black women were forced to sacrifice love, to yield their children to commercial objectification. Black children were severed from their sacred humanity and deprived person identity, their bodies and spirits endangered and traumatized. In Lawrence Hill's novel, The Book of Negroes, the main character, Aminata, is a slave and has her child taken from her. One night, just a week after he's born, she wakes up to hear her son crying, but the sound is coming from the outside. Hill writes, Out there in the night, I jump up, dizzy, confused, and full like an unmilked cow, and there I saw Robertson Appleby put my baby into a man's arms up on a carriage. I ran towards him. The driver whipped a horse, and the carriage pulled forward. The whip struck again, and the carriage sped away, and my baby disappeared into the darkness as fast as a falling star. Well, the characters of that story are fictional. The events are not. This has happened many times, as it would happen to Hagar. Now, in Hagar's case, she was kept around as a useful maid to the household, but Sarah soon accused her of getting above herself. Sarah mistreated Hagar so badly, she tried to run away. What else can one do when there is no recourse for protection, when no one else will stand up for you, when no one else listens to the pain that you're in, when there is no one to stop it? You run away. Even if that means running into a wilderness alone and pregnant, where your chance of survival is slim. To Hagar, that was worth the risk. Now Hagar does return, more on that in a minute, but the whole event is repeated again after both Ishmael and Isaac are born. This time, Sarah doesn't just harass Hagar until she flees. This time, Sarah demands that Hagar is expelled. Hagar is sent off with just some bread and a skin of water and her child. As soon as they run out of water, Hagar leaves the child under the bushes and stands aside, waiting to die. Oh, the pain of Hagar. I can't even imagine it. As Hagar gives up and waits for death, an angel of God appears to her. It's actually the second time she has an encounter with God. When she first ran away, God appeared and told her that God sees her, that her son will be blessed. And now, just as it looks like her son will die, God appears again and points her in the direction of a well. God repeats the promise that Ishmael will be a great nation. Hagar and Ishmael survive. They make a home out of the wilderness, no longer slaves, and the boy becomes an expert in the bow. I started this sermon asking how we find peace when we can't get justice. And this is the question that lingers for me when I think of Hagar. The trauma she experienced at the hands of Sarah and Abraham was horrible enough, but as an escaped slave, she will never have the justice she deserves. You don't just move on from that. It's a pain that compounds the trauma. So how do we find peace? I think the answer is in Hagar's encounters with God. In her first encounter, God makes clear that she is seen. God sees her pain and hears her cry. She is not alone. The Lord has heard of your misery, the angel tells her. To be seen is so important. When we've been harmed, when there's nothing else that can be done to fix it, what we really want is to have that harm recognized and acknowledged. We want to be heard. In God's message to Hagar, we're reminded that if society won't hear you, if family won't acknowledge you, if the corporation won't admit it was wrong, if the legal system turns a blind eye, you are still seen. For God sees you. God saw what happened. It might have been done in the shadows, but one day it will be exposed in God's light. For now, be assured that God sees you. This is so moving for Hagar, so empowering, that she names God the God who sees me. From her second encounter with God, we are told that though we won't see justice, keep moving, keep living, persevere, and persist. God pointed Hagar in the direction of a well and reminded her that her story isn't over yet. In fictional stories, the character who was wronged overcomes impossible odds to exact a justice that we could never find ourselves. That's why we love those stories. But in real life, The justice we seek comes slower, more indirect. Not from confronting our abusers, but from living our lives, by insisting that our story continues. In the Book of Negroes, Aminata, who had had her baby stolen from her, writes her story down, saying, "If I live long enough to finish this story, it will outlive me. Long after I have returned to the spirits of my ancestors, perhaps it will wait in the London Library. Sometimes I imagine the first reader to come upon my story. Could it be a girl, a man, an Englishman, an African? One of the people will find my story and pass it along. And then I believe I will have lived for a reason." Hagar and Ishmael will live. By the grace and power of God, they will survive in a wilderness. They will thrive in it. That in itself is a rebuke to Sarah and Abraham. God blessed the line of Hagar. Her children continued, and her name, her story, is included in this, the greatest story. In the same way, we will have our justice by the simple act of living. Others might not know our story. Others might not believe it. We are owed apologies and reparations that will never come, but we do not let that stop us. We don't let it quiet us. Our story is ours. Maybe for now only God hears it, but as we keep persisting and pushing forward, so does our story. And in God, that story will not end. It becomes part of the story of God's people. Your life, lived in the grace and bounty of God, shines a light that shames those who once tried to stamp it out. Don't believe me? Well, I end with a reminder that today is National Indigenous Peoples Day. Here is a people who for generations have not seen the justice they are owed, who have had their children snatched from them, just like Aminata and Hagar and the slaves of history, a suffering that continued into the 60s scoop and is still echoed in the disproportionate number of Indigenous children in the foster system today. The Canadian people would not hear their cries, but God, our Creator, did. Where once we tried to stomp out a people, God is growing a nation. By continuing, by drinking from that well and finding the strength to persist in the wilderness, by simply living and sharing their story, the injustice of their oppression becomes generation by generation more apparent. It will not be quieted. Their story is God's story, and it will survive beyond us. So if you have been hurt, if you wait for a justice that might never come in this lifetime, remember Hagar. Remember that God sees and hears you. Trust that God is giving you what you need right now to keep going and live. Live your life and let that life be a testament to your story. Every day you persist, every time you laugh and rejoice, you bring justice one step closer. And one day, when justice does finally part the clouds of heaven and rolls down on us, your story, as it is also God's story, will be heard by all people. And in that day, we will find peace. Amen.